Welcome to The Truth of the Matter, a listening series dedicated to uncovering the often overlooked and misunderstood narratives of historical events, both in the United States and around the globe. In a world filled with conflicting accounts and fragmented histories, my mission is to bring clarity to the past by delving deep into the facts, exploring diverse perspectives, and illuminating the truths that shape our understanding of history. Each episode will feature expert insights, compelling stories, and thought-provoking discussions that challenge conventional wisdom and invite you to engage critically with the events that have defined our world. Join me as we embark on a journey to reveal the truth of the matter, because understanding our history is essential for shaping our future.
The honest truth behind Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, celebrated annually on the third Monday in January, is a day of remembrance and reflection for one of the most pivotal figures in American history. It honors the life and work of Dr. King, a leader in the civil rights movement who fought tirelessly for racial equality, justice, and peace in the United States. But while the holiday is widely celebrated as a symbol of progress and unity, the true story behind Martin Luther King Jr. Day is complex, multifaceted, and at times, even controversial. The day serves as a tribute to King's legacy, but it also prompts us to examine the true nature of his mission and the broader struggles that continue to unfold in the fight for racial justice. This video delves into the history, significance, and nuanced truths surrounding Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It explores how King's holiday came to be, the commercialization of his legacy, and the ongoing challenges of living up to the ideals King espoused. 1. The origins of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. The road to Martin Luther King Jr. Day being recognized as a federal holiday was long and contentious, reflecting both the resistance to the ideals King promoted and the challenges of securing recognition for a black leader in the U.S. In 1968, just days after King's assassination, calls for a holiday in his honor began to surface. Many people saw this as a fitting tribute to his leadership and sacrifice. However, it wasn't until 1983 that President Ronald Reagan signed a bill establishing the federal holiday, which would be observed on the third Monday of January each year. Opposition to the holiday was significant. Conservative lawmakers, particularly in southern states,
but since they seem bent on making it a national holiday, I believe the symbolism of that day is important enough that I'll sign that legislation when it reaches my desk.
At that same news conference and in a letter to a prominent conservative, the president seemed to indicate that Dr. King's patriotism might have been open to question. But today in the Rose Garden, surrounded by Dr. King's widow and dozens of civil rights leaders, Mr. Reagan had only praise for Martin Luther King.
Were resistant to honoring King, largely because of his radical stance on issues like poverty, war, and economic inequality. There was also reluctance to celebrate a leader who had actively challenged the status quo, including the government's handling of the Vietnam War and economic disparities. It wasn't until 2000 that all 50 states officially recognized Martin Luther King Jr. Day. In particular, Arizona was a holdout, initially refusing to observe the holiday. The state's refusal led to a boycott of the 1993 Super Bowl, which was scheduled to take place in Phoenix. The economic pressure and national outcry eventually forced Arizona to comply. 2. King's vision and the reality of his legacy. Dr. King's vision was not limited to civil rights alone. His advocacy encompassed the fight for racial, economic, and social justice. King believed in a beloved community where people of all races, classes, and religions could coexist in peace and equality. His famous speeches, such as the I Have a Dream address during the March on Washington in 1963, have become synonymous with the civil rights struggle, but his vision extended well beyond the achievement of legal equality. One of the lesser-known aspects of King's work was his commitment to economic justice. In the years before his assassination, King shifted focus to include issues of economic disparity. He saw the intersection of race and class as inseparable in the fight for justice. King's Poor People's Campaign in 1968 aimed to address the dire economic conditions of poor Americans, both black and white, in urban and rural areas. He was calling for guaranteed income, housing, and access to healthcare, ideas that were radical for the time and are still often contentious today. While the mainstream remembrance of King often highlights his nonviolent approach to racial desegregation, the more radical and multifaceted aspects of his activism are less frequently discussed in mainstream observances of the holiday. King's opposition to the Vietnam War further complicated his relationship with the political establishment. In 1967, King publicly denounced the war, linking it to the oppression of black people at home. In his famous speech, Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence, King stated that the U.S. government was the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, a position that alienated many of his former allies, including political leaders who had previously supported him. King's anti-war stance positioned him against not just the White House, but also much of the American public, who viewed his activism as overstepping the bounds of civil rights. 3. The commercialization of King's legacy. While Martin Luther King Jr. Day was intended to be a day of reflection and activism, it has also become a symbol of commercialization, with many companies, brands, and institutions co-opting King's image for profit. The transformation of the holiday from a solemn occasion for reflection to a day of sales and advertising discounts has sparked controversy. Critics argue that the celebration of King's life and ideals has been commodified in a way that dilutes the substance of his message. King is a symbol of unity. In the corporate world, King's image has often been used to sell products and services. This includes advertisements during the holiday that feature King's quotes about peace and equality. These companies emphasize a message of unity and love, but often fail to confront the deeper issues King championed, such as economic inequality, the militarization of society, and systemic racism. Moreover, public institutions, like schools and universities, sometimes observe Martin Luther King Jr. Day with events that focus primarily on service projects or moments of unity, with little examination of the socio-political issues that King fought for. This can make King's legacy feel more palatable, avoiding any challenge to the status quo, rather than urging people to address ongoing systemic injustices. The danger of simplifying King's message. Another consequence of this commercialization is the tendency to simplify King's message to fit a more mainstream, palatable narrative. The image of King as the dreamer who simply wanted racial harmony can sometimes overshadow his calls for radical social change. This sanitized version of King is more easily consumed in the context of a national holiday but misses the profound implications of his activism, which sought to dismantle the deep-seated systems of power that perpetuated inequality. 4. The state of race relations today. What would King think? As we reflect on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, it's essential to ask, would King be satisfied with the state of race relations today? The answer is likely a complex one. Although significant progress has been made since King's time, many of the issues he spoke about, economic inequality, police brutality, systemic racism, and social injustice, continue to plague society. Despite the landmark civil rights legislation of the 1960s, racial inequality remains entrenched in American society. The Black Lives Matter movement, which arose in response to incidents of police violence against Black Americans, echoes King's calls for justice and accountability. King's dream of a nation where people are judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin is still far from realized. Disparities in education, healthcare, and employment continue to disproportionately affect Black Americans, showing that the fight for equality is far from over. King's commitment to economic justice seems even more relevant today, as wealth inequality in the United States has reached levels not seen since the Great Depression. The rich continue to grow wealthier, while millions of Americans struggle with low wages, inadequate health care, and unstable housing. King's call for a guaranteed basic income and the redistribution of wealth remains a radical proposal, but it is one that could address the rising inequality in the U.S. Ultimately, Martin Luther King Jr. Day offers us an opportunity not only to celebrate progress, but also to reflect on the distance still to be covered in King's struggle for justice. It serves as a reminder that King was not simply a dreamer, but a radical visionary who sought to radically alter the systems that perpetuated inequality. His holiday should serve as an impetus for continuing his work, not as a day to rest on the laurels of past accomplishments, but as a call to action for all who strive to create a more just and equitable world. In conclusion, Martin Luther King Jr. Day is much more than a public holiday. It is a call to reflect on the continued struggles for racial and economic justice in the United States. While the day is celebrated with parades, service events, and speeches, it is crucial that we honor the true spirit of King's activism, challenging the status quo and striving to create a society in which justice is a reality for all. Only by acknowledging both the progress made and the work still ahead can we truly honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you for joining me on a journey to reveal the truth of the matter, because understanding our history is essential for shaping our future.
Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will, and He's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen